Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Foreign Desk with Lisa Daftari podcast. We are inching closer to the election, and as if things couldn't get more interesting this year, alas, the news cycle does not disappoint. So grab the popcorn and let's get right into this. So now, as of last night, news broke that both the DNI and FBI are reporting that the Iran regime has found a way to meddle in U.S. elections. Iran has accessed voter information and has sent out emails claiming to come from the Proud Boys. Remember that right-wing group, which became a point of contention during the first presidential debate? They're basically instructing Democratic voters in swing states like Florida, Arizona, and Pennsylvania to switch to the Republican Party and vote for President Trump. The email even threatened, "I would take this seriously if I were you." So the DNI and FBI are reassuring us that nothing has changed, nothing has been compromised, and of course, Iran is denying any meddling at all. But for most Americans, this questions election safety. It raises the issue of foreign actors meddling and undermining our democracy. And it once again raises the 42-year-old question, what to do about Iran's regime? For the last 10 years or so, the what to do about Iran's regime boiled down to two choices in the foreign policy world. Do we strike a deal with Iran or not? So a deal was drawn up by the P5+1 under a very eager President Obama. And in May of 2018, President Trump withdrew from that deal, calling it a meaningless piece of paper. Now, as we look toward two presidential candidates and an election less than 12 days away, again, two choices for president, two choices for Iran policy. Do we go back to the Iran deal or not? So I stand back and scratch my head a bit and ask, why do we limit our foreign policy on such a complex issue with such a myopic view? How can we narrow our scope to just a yes or no question? For years before that, we were stuck in a different dichotomy. It was to bomb Iran or let Iran get the bomb. Those were the two options, with Democrats giving the mullahs a lenient pass, while certain individuals within the Republican Party stood their hawkish ground and wanted military action against Iran. So why is there no nuance in our strategy? It seems like regardless of the foreign policy dilemma, we're always trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach to circumstances, which are each so unique in nature. And speaking of unique, hold those thoughts right there. I want to bring in our esteemed guest for today's discussion, someone who understands Iran, who understands strategy. It's the impressive Mr. Bijan Kian. Mr. Kian is a twice confirmed advisor to the White House under 3 consecutive administrations, reporting directly to Presidents Bush and Obama, and serving as the deputy lead on President Trump's landing team for the Office of Director of National Intelligence, also an Ellis Island Medal of Honor recipient, globally recognized expert on the economy and national security. Mr. Kian, I am so grateful that you're here with us today. I can't think of a more fitting expert as somebody who has been part of the DNI, somebody who understands Iran, and of course, a wonderful, brilliant expert like yourself. Welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Lisa, and your viewers. It's my pleasure, and I'm humbled with that introduction. Looking forward to, break open all these interesting subjects with you. And, you said something about denial in Farsi. As you know, we have an old expression that says the wall of denial is very tall. So that's no surprise. No surprise coming from Tehran.
Yes, perfectly put. So let's start out by taking a listen from Director of National Intelligence John Radcliffe, his briefing yesterday on Iran's involvement in sending out these emails. Let's take a listen, and I want to get your reaction.
We would like to alert the public that we have identified that 2 foreign actors, Iran and Russia, have taken specific actions to influence public opinion relating to our elections. First, we have confirmed that some voter registration information has been obtained by Iran and separately by Russia. This data can be used by foreign actors to attempt to communicate false information to registered voters that they hope will cause confusion, sow chaos, and undermine your confidence in American democracy. To that end, we have already seen Iran sending spoofed emails designed to intimidate voters, incite social unrest, and damage President Trump.
Yeah, so let's start with this. What do you make of this news?
Well, I think Moscow is coordinating with Tehran to meddle in U.S. elections for obvious reasons. We've all heard Javad Zarif, foreign minister of Islamic Republic, saying with just such a sweet smile that he has all the time that when he was serving in New York at the United Nations, he made friends with elected officials who were then representatives in the Senate. And when the reporter asked him, so like who? And he said, well, some of them have grown into bigger, better, more powerful positions. And he said, you're referring to Mr. Biden. And with that famous smile of his Excellency, the foreign minister, said, yes, Mr. Biden. So it's no surprise that Moscow would be coordinating this with Tehran, and, getting access to voter poll, lists is not such a complicated thing. And then, of course, sending those letters. And, what's interesting to me is the big cry coming out that, Director of National Intelligence is not an honest broker. And so what do you expect the Director of National Intelligence of the United States to do? Two countries have meddled, and we have proof of that, meddled in our election, so close to the election. It's a very tumultuous year. What do you expect the Director of National Intelligence to do? Not tell the American public that the world's top terror sponsor government in the world is together with Russia, because it's all coordinated, as you know, they need that help. They need, to make sure the servers are placed in countries where they would be difficult to trace. But thankfully, our country has capabilities that no other country has in the world. And we have full visibility into all of that which they wish that we won't see. But we do see, and we know. So you don't expect him to remain silent. Of course, he's doing a job and is coming out and saying this happened. So, we'll see what more comes out from all the interesting stories that are being developed.
Right. And what's upsetting about this is that this is being seen as something coming out of the Trump administration. So it's not taken as seriously. And I liked what Director Ratcliffe said at the end of his briefing, said, this is a bipartisan issue. I mean, when we're so divided that we're not willing to see meddling by a foreign actor as something that really goes against all Americans and has really disrupted our democracy versus something that's either a Trump or Biden issue. And to that end, we had an article yesterday morning. It's really interesting in terms of timing, published on the Foreign Desk on Iran seeking to influence people to vote for Biden and against Trump. And then a few hours later, this story broke, and you have a ultra right wing group telling people to vote for Trump. So people are seeing this as, wait a minute, you guys said that the Iranian regime was for Biden. Now it looks like he's for Trump. So how can we connect all these things?
Well, it's not too difficult, Lisa, and you're an expert in this yourself. You've been watching these ups and downs of politics for a long time. What's happening is interesting. I'd like to say a few words about the calculation on the other side. In Tehran, if the popular belief is that, we've been friends with Joe Biden for a long time, we knew him from his Senate days, he really thinks like us, and so forth, they're wrong. They're absolutely dead wrong. I don't want to give the impression that, there is a huge difference in national security between Republicans and Democrats. We have a bureaucracy in place, and the bureaucracy works well most of the time. Sometimes it breaks down like any other bureaucracy, but most of the time it works well. And Tehran is wrong to think that they can get away too long with too much with any administration in the United States. We know too much about the intentions of the Islamic Republic. We know too much about their absolutely violent acts of terrorism around the world, and I don't think it's going to be a very, very good time for Tehran, regardless of what comes out of this election. And of course, I still haven't changed my bet. I believe President Trump is going to win this election. And what if he does? What if he does? What is Tehran going to do then with this stellar record of shameful. You're looking at a government that, for the first time in history, the government has come to power through terrorism, through committing an act of terror. They took 52 Americans hostage and said, we're going to hold them until you give us some kind of a guarantee. And finally, on the 19th of January of 1980, the accord in Algiers was signed. And the first line of that accord reads that the United States would never interfere in the affairs of the Islamic Republic in Iran. That's what they wanted. They took hostages to get that clause. And this is the first time in history that a government has come to power by an act of terrorism and has maintained their power by continuing their support for global terror. And, how is this government going to solve their other problems? And we could get into that. It's a long list of ineptitude, kleptocracy, and just institutionalized corruption that's eating away at the very foundation of the government of Islamic Republic. They have many problems. I don't think Joe Biden is going to solve them, even in the unlikely event he gets elected.
Yeah, I want to get into all of that a little bit later, including the access that they have here in the United States. But just to push back on what you just said, in terms of Tehran's expectation out of Washington, it's quite a pivot if you want to compare the Obama years and Trump's dealing with Iran. So by that calculation, Biden was a vice president at that time. So why wouldn't Iran expect a more lenient approach? I mean, Trump is trying to stop terror, and President Obama gave them money to go on a shopping spree for terror.
Our bureaucracy broke down. I just said that bureaucracy sometimes breaks down. We're 244 years old, and I think for 8 years, very clearly, and it's happened before, occasionally in our history, our bureaucracy is broken down occasionally. And during the President Obama, I worked for President Obama, and I had the greatest honor of serving him directly. But I disagreed with many of his policies, and President Obama had a different worldview, and his worldview is proven to have been absolutely wrong. You ask yourself, how did that happen? How did the administration of the United States become so friendly with the world's top sponsor of terror, a government that had actually killed American soldiers all over the world? How did that happen? Well, you don't have to really go too far to listen to Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes, who said we created an echo chamber. Yep. And that echo chamber helped spread all of this, and our bureaucracy broke down. Our bureaucracy all of a sudden got sensitive that, we don't want to go to war. We just, we hear a lot of things, and they're not all substantiated. Even though 90% is substantiated, that 10% that remains there is a question enough to be skeptical. That was wrong. All of that was wrong.
But how do we know? How do we know that we're not going to get? And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to really get to the real central point of this, is to say we're not hearing anything out of the Biden-Harris ticket. Nothing. The only thing they're running on is not being Donald Trump. It could be Mickey Mouse. And, we're not hearing anything in terms of foreign policy. So how do we know, or how does Tehran know by their calculation, that they're not going to get another broken foreign policy, so to speak?
We don't know. We don't know that, Lisa. We have no indication right now that the coming administration is going to be hostile. But, I believe this firmly, that we have changed. This is, we've learned those lessons. We can't forget history, and it's there. It's very unlikely that another cache of cash would be sent to Iran on pallets in the dark of the night, in large denominations, and it's not going to happen again. It will never happen again. That story will not be repeated. And if Tehran is expecting a repeat of the good old days, not going to come. So as far as lifting sanctions, let me just say this, and I'll just say it briefly. And I'm a student of these matters, as you mentioned earlier, for 40 years. I've been trying to understand things. I'm still trying to understand them. I would say confidently that a rapprochement will be the kiss of death for the Islamic Republic. And that is the biggest miscalculation that the Islamic Republic can ever think about. The other thing is, you think the IRGC, who's now being talked about to be the next power source in Tehran, do you think they will want a normalized relations? Do you think it's good for their health?
Oh, exactly.
They are thieves. They are, the word kleptocracy comes from the IRGC. It comes from the actions that they've done. So there is a complex formula here that we've gone beyond the yes and no's anymore. Things have changed. So I'm not just being optimistic. I'm being, as objective as one can be.
Right. And I think, what do we say to those who look at, even at this point, if we don't appease them, we're going to have to go to war.
Yeah. That narrative doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. We go to war. No, just like I said, that sending cash is not going to happen. We're not going to have another Iraq war. It's not going to happen. History has taught us lessons, and we don't need to do that. There is no need to do that. Look at the Islamic government today, the Islamic Republic in Iran, as I call them. Look at them. Look at their bank account. Look at their oil extraction and oil sales. It's gone down. It's gone down. They just don't have any money. Don't listen to them. These are whistling in the dark saying we're going to go buy any weapons we want and sell any weapons we want to anyone. This is all big talk. They are not able to continue with what they have, the resources, and war is not necessary. At the end of the day, Islamic Republic is going to be thinking rationally, and they're going to say to themselves, what am I going to do? They will continue to make as little change as they possibly can to look better and better and better. So if you were to forecast, you will see a general as the head of the government in Tehran, and this general is going to say, guys, if we want to continue making money off this stuff, we got to cool it down a little bit and not do billions at a time. We should do maybe millions of stealing for a while and cool it down and start looking better and, leave the ladies alone. If they want to show a little bit of their hair, let them do that. It's okay. And, what's going to happen is that the circle of kleptocracy is going to get tighter and tighter. It's going to be harder to steal. And when that happens, the system, which is basically standing on kleptocracy, because there's no belief. They don't believe in anything. It's not like, oh, good Muslims all want to do this. Good Muslims don't look at women's hair. That's nonsense. And it's going to get tighter and tighter. And then people are not going to be going along with the system. And you know what happens when the foundation gets shaky? What's on top will fall. And that's the essential physics of politics. It's just not going to work any other way.
Yes, and I think Donald Trump has the same calculation you have. I want to get back to your bet about him winning. And he said, China, Iran, they don't want to let me win. And I quote, he says, the first call I'll get after we win, the first call I get will be from Iran saying, let's make a deal. End quote. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's, diplomacy. Diplomacy is always on the table. Lisa and your viewers know that no sound, reasonable mind is going to say, well, we're going to cut diplomacy. We're never going to. Diplomacy is always on the table. Why? Because there's a cost. There's a cost to confrontation, and governments always want to act rationally in their best interest. And what they do is they calculate. And, war is always the last option. They're very expensive and very uncertain. Wars remain, the results of a war always is uncertain. Not just winning or losing. Look, we won in Iraq, but what happened? Look, we went to Afghanistan with such a force, but look what happened. We've been there 20 years and we're still there. So no, I don't think war is something that's in the cards. Islamic Republic is not a sustainable system. It's fractured, and these fissures in the system are so deep, so wide, that are not going to be repaired. Islamic Republic is not going to be there for too long. Look, Ayatollahs are old, and with the diet they keep, I hear they have caviar for breakfast every morning. They're not going to last that long. They're not going to last that long. So this system is doomed to die.
So how do we, take advantage of the fissures that already exist? Let's get back to my initial question. What do we do about this 42-year-old problem? I know you're in touch with dozens of Iranians across the geographic, geopolitical, and social patchwork of Iran's population. I mean, we were introduced to it. When I say we, the mainstream media was introduced to a lot of those people, whether they were from the bazaar, or they were young women coming out without hijab, or they were, all sorts of people coming out into the protests and saying, it's not just a certain segment from Tehran, which was believed in the 2009 Green Revolution, but there's a lot of us who are done with this system. So how can we take advantage of our allies in Iran?
That's a very important point, Lisa, and you go right to the heart of what has been on my mind for a very long time. For 40 years, I've heard this line of let's unite. Today, only unity. What does that mean, really? What does that mean? Who? Uniting who? If you're talking about people outside of Iran, what would that lead to? Let's say all the groups, all the opposition get together and they all are united with one voice against the Islamic Republic. What's going to happen then? The world remains the same. Europe wants to do business with Iran. The United States has been, like you said, between yes or no's for 40 years. Nothing would change. And we got to take a look at what has happened. This slogan, which I believe it's a completely empty slogan, if it meant to be united for the people of Iran, absolutely correct and necessary. But if it's meant to unite people outside of Iran, it's been an exercise in futility. Whoever is promoting this notion is not going to get anywhere. Unity is essential amongst people of Iran. They have to come to an understanding that they deserve better than this brutal tyranny of the Islamic Republic. They deserve better. And the good news is 70% of the population in Iran is under 40 years old now. And that means that they really don't remember how Iran was before. They never lived there. However, isn't it ironic and isn't it interesting that this young Iranians are very brave, very brave. If you take the performance 40 years of people outside of Iran and compare it to the performance of the people inside Iran, you would see, yes, in a corrupt, tyrannical government of Iran, people have been courageous. They've come to the streets. They've lost their lives. It's completely unfair to blame them for anything. They've fought valiantly against this monster, and they have not succeeded. Why? Because as people of Iran unite inside, then those outside should become their voice. They should reflect that. They should echo that. Instead of the echo chamber that Mr. Ben Rhodes created, that echo chamber must be operated by real people like yourself and other people who have the means to talk to policymakers, decision makers, and educate them, really, not lobbying, but educating them about the realities. For too long, the propaganda of the influencers in the United States, which I have to say have been extremely successful. Right. You cannot rule them out. You asked about 8 years of Obama. When you sort everything out and you say, what was really present that wasn't present before? What was it that really made the decisions, the kind of policies that President Obama and his administration made, which we all know they were all wrong. All calculations were wrong. If there was one thing that they did that was right, it would be unfair for me not to mention it. But I cannot find even one act that I could say, except for that one, it was good. No, all wrong. So what do? We must change our ways. They say the test of sanity is to believe that you cannot keep doing what you're doing and expecting a different result. So we have to change. We have to change the way we look at the Islamic Republic. A couple of principles. If you can change Islam, you can change Islamic Republic. Very simple. There is absolutely no argument for reform within a system that is based on Islam. Islam is the only religion that comes together with its own form of government.
Right.
Separation of religion and state in Islam is not permitted. That is a violation. That is just not, it's forbidden. It can never happen. So
Right.
I don't know the argument of those who say, well, give it time, it will reform. No, this is not communism. This is Islam. Islam cannot change. So that's what we have to do. We could talk for hours about what has gone wrong and what we've done outside the country,
Right.
and what has gone on inside the country, and the role of governments around the world. Russia is a declining economy. Russia, you go out and try and find something useful to buy that says "Made in Russia." Can you find anything like that? Except missiles and
Exactly.
fighter jets and bombs and things like that. Can you find something decent made in Russia? Somebody gave me a watch many years ago that was apparently made in Russia. It broke. It just doesn't work. So it looked nice at the time, but Russians don't know how to build anything. Look at how they build nuclear plants. Look at what happened in India and Bhopal. And in their own country, people are still suffering. So China is a big country, and Chinese people are wonderful people. I've been there many times on official trips as a diplomat, and personally, just trying to learn what's going on in the country. Chinese are great people. Their government is evil. The Communist Party of China, and all they want to do is stay in power. That's all. So I'm no longer in government, so I can freely talk about anything using any words I like, and I will not hesitate to say Communist Party of China is evil. So yeah, we have to look at it differently. There's a Persian poem that says you got to wash your eyes and see the world a bit differently, and that's what we need to do.
Yes. And I want to go inside and out because you mentioned that. Let's start by starting from Washington. And this is a question I get asked a lot because I am an Iranian, but I'm also for sanctions and I'm for the pressure campaign. And people think that that's hypocritical. How could you be for sanctions on your own people? Because obviously, they trickle down into Main Street economy. And people have difficulty getting pharmaceutical supplies. And of course, that burden is passed on to the people. And my reaction is always, well, you can tell a lot by the protests and the slogans used in those protests. When you have Iranians saying, "Na Gaza, na Lebanon, janam fadaye Iran," which translates into "not Gaza, not Lebanon, I live only for Iran," it goes to show, a maturing of the protesters that now understand that the money that is supposed to be for them, regardless of where that comes from, that their government is prioritizing their global and terror endeavors to supporting and helping the local economies and to help the people of Iran. So my point being, how do we explain both to the people of Iran? I think it's very important that narrative is clarified. And I ironically think the people of Iran probably understand that are more supportive of President Trump than the naysayers are in this country. Those people who are, for human rights and for, separation of church and state, like you said. But when it comes to the Iranian regime, they're all for it. How do we explain sanctions and the pressure campaign to the naysayers?
This is a very difficult situation, and it's a very easy explanation. The difficult situation is you and I, before being Iranian Americans, we're human beings. What human being would not be sad about just imagining someone on an operating table being deprived of a necessary, medicine or a tool that would save their lives? Of course, it just breaks anybody's hearts to think about such a situation. But that's the hard part. The easy part is there are no sanctions on medicine at all. If you look at that, there's a complexity. The complexity is, and they're writing this, and I have to be fair. They say yes, there's no sanction on medicine, but no bank would open a letter of credit, which is essential to transact because the buyer doesn't know the seller. They have to go through the banking system, and banks are not willing to do that. Banks are not willing to do that because of the reputation risk that they have. They don't wish to have to explain that we had a permit, that this was okay. They don't want to do it. So it is a real problem. And I would be unfair if I didn't mention this technicality in this. So yes, there is no sanctions on medicine, but there are problems. However, it's an easy answer because United States government has actually designated financial institutions who can transact as an exception on medicine. That problem has been addressed in policy and has been removed. Now, why doesn't it happen? Oh, because you have the Islamic Republic in Tehran saying, no, not that bank. I want this bank to do it. Why? Mm-hmm. Because that bank is under the microscope of the United States, and we can't have any unusual, leakage from the transaction, money coming out, kickbacks, and stuff like that. It's not going to happen. So that's the problem. That's the problem. And sanctions are not a good thing on people. They will definitely have an impact. But let's take a deeper look. Let's say we lift all sanctions today. Let's say United States government and United Nations sanctions and European sanctions all go away today. Take a look at Tehran. Take a look at the country. Who's running the country? What's the banking system look like? The reason banks don't want to deal with Iranian banks is because Iranian banks are essentially bankrupt. They are broken. They are not operational. Bank for International Settlement in Basel, Switzerland sets the rules for all banks to have certain amount of capital, certain amount of reserves, certain safety and soundness in an operation. Iranian banks cannot qualify. I will challenge on this program and on any other means I have the Islamic government to open their banking systems to an internationally accepted audit and see how many banks in Iran are going to be able to pass. Lisa and the viewers know that, giving a loan in banking has some rules. You can't just give a loan to someone because the banker has a responsibility to make sure that there's a reasonable assurance of repayment and a capability to do that. That's not how banks operate there. So sanctions are not, nobody is going to say sanctions are a good thing and they don't affect people. Of course they do. But let's say we take them off. They're all gone. How is the country going to be different? With ineptitude, with institutionalized corruption, with a broken banking system, and with a country that's bankrupt altogether because the money has been siphoned out to individuals who are in the inner circle of the Ayatollahs. Look at the rumors on the accounts now. Mm-hmm. Some of it we know for sure. We see it. We know where these accounts are. And some of it we don't see because it's so well spread around the world. But sanctions are bad, but they are necessary. Sanctions are necessary because unless the government of the Islamic Republic is deprived of, one, making money, and two, continuing their institutionalized corruption, nothing will change for the people of Iran.
Right. And, I think one of the things you alluded to is that access that the tentacles of the regime have in not only spreading narratives about sanctions, hurting, individuals in Iran all over social media, getting people to really be sympathetic to their cause. And, just yesterday, there's a piece in National Review, an Iran lobby in America. And I'm sure you and I both looked at this headline and thought, you're about 20 years too late on this piece, but thank you for introducing the world to NIAC and other individuals like them that are doing the mullah's bidding in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're going to go back a little bit about, there's always more parts to a story than you could see with naked eye. Yeah, let's go back to the situation that 20 years ago when this organization was formed. You have a significant population of Iranians in the United States, And when you talk to them, they're not all the same. You will see that some would say, look, I'm not a political person. My grandma lives in Iran. I got to go back there once a year and see my grandma. And, I just don't want to get into politics, and I don't want to say anything that when I go back to Iran at the airport there, I'm not going to stop and being placed in a room and interrogated. So the scary things that go after that. So this is the community that also complains, says, I don't understand this travel ban. Grandma cannot come here and visit, grandchildren. And I'm very upset about that. I'm very upset at any policies. So it's in such division in the community that another element must be considered. The government of Islamic Republic says, okay, so we don't have diplomatic relationships. Usually countries have something called an embassy on each other's soil. Part of it is to issue visas for people who want to travel, but another part of the embassy does something a lot more valuable and important for governments, and that is to gather information, to kind of have a sense of what's going on the ground. And when they lost that, they can't have that. And of course, part of that is what Mr. Zarif himself, the foreign minister of Islamic Republic, claims, that when I was in New York, I developed relationships. So that's a very important part of the function of an embassy, in short. Now, Islamic Republic says, I don't have that. Now, what do I do? Okay, well, what do I have? I have the ability to export my academics there, to go into academic institutions and start making arguments, however shallow they may be, such as, there is reform that's possible and all that. Complete, utter nonsense. Because, like I said, if you can reform Islam, you can reform Islamic Republic. They say, politics doesn't have a nature, absolutely, but religions do. And they just have these nonsensical arguments in the academia. Islamic government says, I can send business people to the United States. They have all these businesses and legitimate, no problem. What if I create a network? I create a network of support, and then I need an organization to weaponize that network. And this organization is going to, so people who worry about travel to Iran and grandma coming to visit, keep that. And then the government that's lost the diplomatic ties and now needs to create that network. And then naturally, an organization pops up by the help of people who used to hold power in the old ancien regime in Iran, and their family members, educated people. I actually ran into a couple of people who are extremely active and passionate about it in Washington, D.C. It wasn't too difficult to see them, and they were making all this, exaggerated stories about how the economy is growing and how the country is doing so well, and Iran is now the cradle of security in the region. So this organization comes about in such an environment and starts growing, and people notice the unusual nature that is going on. That here's an entity that says, I want to educate people. Fine, you can educate people, but actively operates in both countries, has offices there are people there. And there were articles prior to what you mentioned, National Review. There was an article some years ago that was published on the Daily Beast, a very long article that went deep into the history. So people were aware of the unusual nature of the operation of such an organization that was so strongly advocating for a terrorist sponsoring, essentially corrupt government of Islamic Republic, the tyranny that exists. And people, said things. They protested, and the organization had a lot of money and a lot of support. Took it to court actually for libel. And Lisa, the organization lost. In fact, they even appealed the court's decision, and they lost the appeal to the tune of $180,000 of expenses paid to the individual, the accused of damaging the organization's reputation. So you don't have to go too far. Just go back and read the court documents as to what the judges said about, anybody can be accused of anything. There are many people who have been accused of things, and we know many, including myself. But that the last verdict speaks to the finality of the judgment. And
Yes.
you could just read the background of the appeal as well as the initial complaint, to know the nature of this organization. This organization is a friend of the Islamic Republic by default or by design. If it's by design, it may be running into violation of the laws of the United States. And I'm not a lawyer. I let lawyers decide on that. But if it's by default, it doesn't make any difference. They are actually together on the same team with the IRGC person who uses his plastic baton imported from China or North Korea to hit a young girl in the face.
Right.
They are same team. They're on the same team. This organization is on the same team with the smuggler brothers, as they call them, in the IRGC that brings opium from Afghanistan or other places into Iran and corrupts the lives of young people. They're on the same team. This organization is on the same team with that. Whether they have the intention to be on that team or not, it doesn't matter. By default, they are.
Yes,
so,
and we'll continue.
What can I say?
We'll continue trying to show that they're not for the people of Iran, and they never were. And speaking of the final verdict, I think you and I have always agreed on, the final verdict or the ultimate answer to the 42-year-old problem in Iran will come from the people in Iran. And I know that's how you're spending your time, and I've spent most of my career doing the same, giving them a voice, giving them a platform, a voice for the voiceless, as we say. But my last question to you is the ultimate, the crystal ball, but also some strategy and logistics. How can the people of Iran? There are all these powerful voices, powerful anecdotes that you hear on a daily basis, that I hear on a daily basis, that motivate me, that tell me that this individual, this young girl in some small town, that she can lead the revolution, or some young man who has aspirations to study engineering or whatever it may be. There are so many of these individuals. But how do they organize? That is the one ingredient that has been missing for 42 years, whether it's outside or inside, more importantly, inside. How do they organize to take Iran into the future?
I think you really point to an absolutely crucial question, and I'm happy to share a few thoughts on that. You're absolutely right. One of the reasons I say that the Islamic Republic is not a sustainable system anymore is because Iranians have woken up. It's gone beyond that. The young people in Iran today, I wish I could tell you with a little bit more detail of the profiles of the individuals, but I'm afraid from a security point, I may be endangering their lives. I talk to them. They call me and they say to me, Mr. Kian, please tell people not to stop sanctions. We can take the pain. Let us take the pain. It's like having a necessary surgery. It's like having to take necessary bitter medicine. We will do it. Tell them to continue that. That's what I hear. That's what I hear from young people especially. And I hear, look, we have no future. If you make a deal with them, please tell people, don't make a deal with them. Make a deal with us, with the Iranian people. That's what I hear. So it's very simple, very simple. The United States and Europe, and I have better expectations from Europe. Unfortunately, Europe has not been acting in the best long-term interest. They've gone for 15% growth in two-way trade between the two countries. I won't name the country, but if you're very interested, you can look up Germany. And they're continuing those practices. We have to keep the pressure. People of Iran are asking us to do that. I don't feel qualified to sit here on this program or anywhere and write a prescription for the people of Iran. The only thing I can do is listen to them and hear what they say and be honest and tell people what I hear, not my own opinion, not people who benefit from one policy or another policy. Stay on the side of the people, reflect their voices, support all those who also reflect the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. And you know what? like this, like right here, provide the counter narrative. Sit here and tell the truth the best you know it. You know, it's a justified belief to me today, without doubt, that the Islamic Republic will not last. But it will be there for a bit longer if the United States makes another deal. If we act in the same way that we've been acting, this false unity outside, which means nothing. What the people of Iran expect is what anybody, anywhere in the world expects a political group to do. Give me options. That means competition. Give me ideas. I want to see 3 or 4 people coming up with ideas of what they would do to get rid of this government first. You know, everybody comes forward and says, if this government is removed, you know, there's going to be a beautiful thing that we're going to be doing that, and I want to be the guy who does it, or the woman that does it. You know, we are not talking like that. It is not our place to talk like that. We ought to listen to them. We ought to reflect what they say. We ought to support everyone who supports that voice. You see that the tip of the arrow is pointed from Iran to the outside. It's not the other way around. We got to listen to them. Right. And, you know, we could continue doing this. It is our responsibility. We're all as humans, not just as Americans, because we have a constitution that tells us that, you know, all human beings are equal with inalienable rights that they're born with. So that's the principle we follow.
Thank you so much. Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it here. Mr. Kian, thank you so much for your expertise, for your service to our nation, for your ongoing endeavors, passion for this arena. I could speak to you for days, but unfortunately, we are out of time. And for those of you who want to sign up for my top 10 daily email, go to foreigndesknews.com/newsletter. And to subscribe to our weekly podcast, go to YouTube/Lisa Daftari. And I hope to see you next time.